Hey everyone, welcome back to Redditly. Today's video is titled, My Story, Long and Ranty, I'm Sorry. Please make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a future upload from us. Let's get right into it. I just found this sub a few minutes ago, read a story somewhat similar to my own, so I figured why not share mine. My wife and I got married in November of 2012 and had our son in mid-2013. Now, of course, building up through the pregnancy and to his birth, our relationship drastically changed from where it was when we were dating. I thought nothing of it at the time, but looking back, I do wonder. Regardless of when my son was about 6 months old, I started getting very weird feelings from my wife on a pretty consistent basis. Now, I am very in my own head person for a lot of reasons. I have suffered from severe chronic migraines for 16 years. I have crippling anxiety. I am mired in self-doubt and no self-worth, and I didn't know this until very recently, but I have severe depression. So because of all that, I often overanalyze and overthink everything, and that made me second-guess myself about these feelings I had. So this went on for some time and my suspicions grew. I worked at a local Navy base at the time, so we were all well off and my wife didn't need to work and was able to stay at home with our son. Eventually though, for reasons I honestly don't remember, she began working at a local burrito place, which I hated before what happened here. For a period after she started, we only had one car, which became really annoying very fast. These feelings turned into something I could no longer keep to myself. So I started talking to anyone I felt I may have better advice that I could come with alone, and everyone basically told me, oof, yeah, doesn't sound like she's being faithful. I was still unsure at this point. Now this space, I was about an hour drive, and eventually a girl got hired that lived somewhat close to me, and my wife kept pushing us to carpool, which struck me as so odd back then. Eventually, she started trying to push me to spend time with this girl, and that was when I really decided I had to do some investigating. So from the beginning to now was about 6 months or so. At this point, my wife would randomly leave the house for extended periods. She was always very blunt and rude with me. Of course, we also hadn't been intimate in quite some time. She was always on her phone, walked to the other room, etc., etc. I remember walking into our bathroom and I noticed a pair of her underwear that had what surely was jizz in them, and I definitely knew it wasn't mine. I confronted her about it. She blew up on me and told me I was psychotic. My paranoia was already on overload prior to this, but now I really knew I wasn't insane and making this all up out of thin air. We had many discussions at this point about our relationship, and I thought for sure it was coming to an end. This next bit happened prior to all of the events of the story, but after the underwear thing, I immediately remembered it. She was in the shower one day, and we were talking about what made us end previous relationships, whether serious or otherwise. I didn't really have much to offer, but she had always looked for and found a fault in someone, and then once she found it, she could never focus on anything else. As I think anyone would, I asked her, well, what's mine? And she said, I haven't found it yet. Even then, it hurt me because I took it as she was actively looking. So back to the underwear, seeing that popped that comment into my head and I thought, well, I guess she found it. The leaving became more and more frequent and she sometimes would not be home for days at a time. Now again, I was working full time, so this put me in a not great situation because I had moved to where her family was. I had none, so I had no childcare. I had been snooping on her phone at this point for some time and never found anything concrete, but man did I find some awful things she said about me, and that wasn't great. One day, her phone broke, and we bought her a new one. Dumb, right, especially considering what I was so sure of, but it turned out to be the best thing I ever did. We gave her old phone to my son so he could watch videos, etc. And the thought occurred to me one day that maybe she hadn't cleaned off the phone, and it was then I found every ounce of proof I needed but definitely didn't want. Not only had she not cleaned it off, she even still had her Facebook linked to both phones. I had a longtime friend at my place at the time, ironically enough, and his girlfriend was there. And they both knew what the situation was. They listened as I told them I was going to try looking at the phone. I saw the look on their faces they immediately tried to hide of, but didn't do it. I eagerly ran back and grabbed it with some small part of me thinking I can finally be free of this nightmare, but it truly was just the beginning. So my son at the time was a little over 1. He was plodding around and had a huge crush on my friend's girlfriend. He would lift up his shirt and rub his nipples at her so much that they bled. Hopefully this part can be the comedic relief. He was standing over near her and they were probably within arm's reach of both me and the front door. When they saw the look on my face, they must have left, but I honestly don't even remember hearing them leave. But before I dropped to my knees out of disgust, my son ran over to me as the best he could and hugged me. I felt he somehow knew. But I knew back to how his entire life so far he was always kind of standoffish to my wife, so maybe he always knew. Heck, maybe she took him alongside sometimes for all I know. So, with this newfound evidence, I confronted my wife, showed her the phone, etc., and she still denied it. I kicked her out that night, which I still feel terrible for. Her dad confronted me and I told him everything. He was furious of me because of the area we lived in, and once I explained everything, he actually thanked me for handling it the way I did. I never told her mom or any other family member, and that is true to this day. She came back the next day and things actually were better now because I had the gigantic burden off my shoulders of thinking I was insane. I had my validity finally. She eventually told me she wished we didn't have a kid and that she never wanted to see us again, which she still denies saying. But you don't really forget something like that. So I accepted it because for me, that had already happened a long time ago. This whole thing went on for about 1.5 years. We never got a divorce, but we were separated, which even that was tough for me. I grew up being raised by a family friend because my parents weren't together and neither wanted me, and they made sure I knew that. So I still, even after everything, was desperately trying to keep my son from ever experiencing anything close to that. So our life went on. We both knew I knew, but she never admitted it. This kept going until her dad found out he had cancer, and unfortunately, eventually lost his life from it. She called me and told me he had passed, and I left for work and got there as quickly as I could. Even though we weren't together, I wasn't going to leave her alone when she needed someone. So I don't know exactly how long it lasted with this other guy, or when she exactly stopped it, but enter again in my brain. So every day my now increased paranoid self sees things and probably creates things out of nothing. This has caused many fights, but eventually I did get her to admit I was right. I still, as of typing this, have never had the satisfaction of her saying she cheated. Anyway, our 9-year wedding anniversary is this November. Right or wrong, we move past everything eventually, but it never leaves my brain no matter what I do. It all happened 7 years ago roughly, and I don't bring it up. But when I have an anxiety attack or a paranoia bout and I'm alone in my thoughts, of course it rears its ugly head. So from then until now, she has become friends with a few of my male friends and developed her own friendships with them, which I am perfectly fine with. But probably at least 3 or 4 times it has turned into a situation where she talks to them more than she talks to me. We now have another child, and many times during the pregnancy, she said, "I know you think this isn't yours." And she was right. I could get into a lot more, but this is already way more ranty than I intended. She is still not very affectionate, and I guess a very needy person affectionately. She has never said that, but I feel that way, because I have outside of my son never really felt love in my life. She doesn't say goodnight really. No hugs, no kisses, no hand-holding. If any of that happens, it is minimal effort. I always initiate everything from hand-holding to intercourse. It weighs on you, especially with a fragile mind. Is she cheating again? I doubt it. We have 1 car again, which I take for work, and 2 children at home. My son is old enough now where there will be no sneaking. My feeling before that he always knew, he still treats her the same way he did 7 years ago. He loves and respects her, and I'm so proud of how behaved both of my children are. But she herself, her mother, and many others have commented how my son never really wants anything to do with her. I know it eats her alive, and it does give me a small amount of satisfaction. What's led me to type this all? I don't feel loved. I haven't for a long time. I woke up from sleep like I do every night, had a small panic attack, took my medication, and then I Google searched, "I don't think my wife loves me anymore." and that led me to this subreddit. Did I move past the cheating? I guess, but I don't know what my mind is strong enough. Did she cheat again since? I'll always think she did, because I believe once a cheater, always a cheater. At the end of the day, if she does, there won't be second forgiveness, and I'm okay with being alone if it comes to that. I'm 31 with not an ounce of self-worth and a brain that feels like those old brains that they do on drug commercials. I have my kids and they both love me, so even if my wife doesn't anymore, their love is enough to keep me alive at least. Thanks to anyone who reads this, and I'm sorry it is so long.